what I think is going to be the most interesting component of Brad being elevated to this role, and Danny hit on it a little bit when he was asked in one of his, post announcement interviews. He said, and this didn't come as any surprise to anybody, Brad was very involved in a lot of conversations, had his say, didn't always agree with what we did, so now this is, and he didn't say this in a rude way or anything, but he said this is now Brad's opportunity to do it, obviously his way, to have that say. What really interests me, especially coming directly from coaching these very players to now deciding upon their futures, is we're going to find out what Brad really thinks of them, not as people, but as, value to the team, as assets. We're gonna find out just how untradeable Jaylen Brown is, or Marcus Smart is, or how important Kemba Walker is, or how desperately, based on reports that emerge, he is to move that contract and get rid of him at all costs, and give up a young player with him, or an asset, or what's the Robert Williams contract situation going to be, or is Brad just really down on what his health has been in the years that he's been in the NBA? We're going to find out how Brad truly views the roster that he has been coaching for so many years. And to me, that's fascinating.
I think of all the people that were annoyed that Danny Ainge gave the Celtics a roster where all of its perimeter depth were all guys in their first or second year, I think Brad was probably the most frustrated out of all of them. And I think that's probably a clear example of what Danny is pointing to there. And I mean, hey, Danny at least got him Fournier and Jabari Parker, who I guess had his moments later in the season. But Brad, so like there's what I call like the Brad Stevens system with rookies, which is that if you're a rookie, you don't get to play until you know the defensive system to the point that you're not making mistakes every possession. So that means that rookies don't get to play until like game 60 of the season. And credit to Peyton Pritchard, he somehow managed to break the molds. But like Marcus and Tatum are the only rookies I could think of before Pritchard in Brad's entire tenure that were in the rotation their rookie year. Everyone else, like, literally barely even plays. Romeo Langford, it took him half a season to break through. Neesmith half a season to break through. And then Stevens was probably mostly playing those guys because they just kind of had to, frankly. And so I think that he's probably going to want to shore up the veteran depth of his team and not just scrape the bottom of the barrel with like Jeff Teague and Jabari Parker. And no offense to those guys, but like they're we know who they are at this point in their careers. They're not the players they once were anymore. And so I think that's probably going to be his big target. I'm sure he was probably a little frustrated that they spent their entire MLE on a center that isn't really much of an offensive player. And so it was kind of a struggle to figure out how to utilize Thompson correctly this year. And obviously they what did they start like Thompson and Tice together for like 30 games? I feel like Stevens just wants to make sure this team has tremendous versatility like it did over the last few seasons before this last one. And I wouldn't be surprised if he sacrificed a little bit of that long-term development to be able to achieve that. And so like if they could trade Kemba Walker and get a few decent role players in return, I think that would be a huge win for them, because as good as Kemba Walker is when he's healthy, his health has been so erratic and his availability has been so erratic to the point that they don't really need his potent offense as much as they just need good depth at this point. And also because I think if they want to keep Marcus Smart and move on from Kemba, that Smart's actually shown he's actually a lot more useful in a point guard role, where I don't think he's turning it over and gunning it nearly as much. I think he takes on a different mentality. And so it might make sense with the way that Tatum and Brown are developing as playmakers to just have Marcus Smart as your point guard. But of course, everyone talks about Kemba Walker like he has a torn knee and he's done. He doesn't. Like he's playing and he's not 100%. Maybe with a full off season and being 100% getting into the season, he actually might start playing like he did in was it May, when he was averaging like 30 a night for a few weeks. We could see him get back to that next year. And like they love Kemba. He came in second place in the NBA in the Sportsmanship Award earlier this week. Like he is absolutely beloved by everybody. And if he's given you even like 80% of what he can't give you, then he's obviously worth keeping around.
Unless, of course, he's, not playing every other game.
Yeah, he needs to be playing every other game.
As you outline all that, and I'm really kind of just thinking about this for the first time, but, you think back at that, like, that iconic scene in Moneyball, and feeding into this point, baseball and basketball are very different. Also, this didn't even happen in real life. It was just a scene in the movie. But, where Brad Pitt, Billy Bean is just up and like trading guys away from Art Howe because he says, you're going to play my guys. Like your guys are not, you're not doing this your way. You're doing this my way. As Brad builds out this team, and no question, they did not have the most versatile team in recent years, and that was a problem, and probably to his dismay. And I can't imagine Danny loved it even though he was obviously the architect of the roster. As Brad does build this thing out, he does have to some degree keep whomever his new coach is, that vision in mind, because there is whatever system they're playing, it's not going to be Brad's system. It's going to be this person's system. So that does sort of, I don't know, it has to factor in, obviously, the situations he builds out that roster. And I'll be curious to see how he balances that fact as well, because it'd be easy for him to sit there and in the big office and say, all right, what do I need? How would I do this? Now I've got final say, except, well, he's got final say, but he's not now running practices and games.
I mean, I think Brad is probably going to take on a pretty similar ethos to what Ainge did, and that he's going to empower his coach to be a part of that decision-making process. And I mean, any GM who doesn't have their coach, coming to them and basically being like, here's what I want to do. So let's get players that fit into the mold that we want. And let's get players that I like, that I know will work with me. I mean, then the GM's not doing their job. There are some adversarial coach to GM situations like that throughout the league, but it seems like Brad is going to be able to choose who his coach is going to be for the most part. So that probably won't be that situation. And then like maybe there's a Scott Hatterberg out there for the Celtics where they trade Marcus Smart for like a couple role players that aren't nearly as impactful as he is. And that balance just works. Obviously, they could certainly try to do that with Kemba Walker. So maybe that is what happens out there. And maybe Evan Fournier is that guy, and they just like need a full season of Fournier healthy for him to show that he's that guy. So, this team might not be that huge of a tweak away from once again playing like they were the year before, where their defense was super intense and on a string and they knew what they were doing, and their offense had a little bit more flow to it, and didn't fall back into isolation the same way. Because it's not like this team got its roster gutted and that's why they were bad. They were bad because they were playing like crap.
Hi guys, Cedric Maxwell here. I want to take a minute to tell you about Marigold Medical. I'm used to keeping my body in great shape, but with arthritis, even the most simple everyday tasks became unbearable. As soon as I called Marigold Medical, I knew I was in good hands. No drugs, no surgery, just an experienced team of caring professionals that wanted to get me back to doing the things I love. Make the call to Marigold Medical and get back to pain-free life.